Welcome to today's webinar. It's Thursday, April 5th, 2018. And before we begin, we're going to go through some of the features of Zoom and do a brief introduction of today's topic. Be sure that you're using the chat feature to communicate and ask questions. We are silencing everybody over audio in order to minimize background noise. I will be sharing with you some of the features of Zoom so that you can know how to use the chat. Live captioning is available during today's webinar, and I will show you how to activate that if you haven't already. The slide deck for this webinar is available for download at our AEM Center event webpage. And Leslie will also provide the link to that in our in the chat. The link to today's recording will also be available within a week at the webpage that's above. The same place where you'll download the PowerPoint for today is where you'll be able to access the recording for this webinar. And if you're tweeting, please tweet to the hashtag AIM4All. To use the text chat, if you're new to Zoom, you'll see that there's a chat panel along the menu in your window. In the left upper corner of the window, you will see a chat option. When you be sure to choose all panelists and attendees when you are choosing to enter text into the chat. Unfortunately, it's not by default to all panelists and attendees, so please choose that from the drop-down menu that you see just above the area, the text field where you type into. To view closed captions for today, click on the closed caption option in the upper right corner of your Zoom window. You should see that there's that closed captioning is available. You should see that notice. And then captions will appear along the bottom of your screen. And if you have any questions, please be sure to enter that into the chat. Today's topic is one that's in the series of webinars that we have been offering for our AEM State Contacts and NIMAC coordinators. Today is by Learning Ally and Edward Bray, who's the National Director of Government Relations and State Initiatives for Learning Ally, will be walking us through what the important features and what AEM State Contacts and NIMAC coordinators should know about Learning Ally. And Ed, we welcome you to our webinar series and thank you for joining us. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that you can take over.
All right. That's what I want. Share screen. Okay, hopefully everyone is seeing the first slide of the Learning Ally presentation. Cynthia, could you unmute yourself and just confirm that for me?
Yes. And everybody should also be, yes.
Excellent.
That's great. And if everybody else wants to confirm that in the chat, that would be great. I see it just fine. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here this afternoon and to share some information about Learning Ally with all of you. Let me start off by saying a large portion of what we're going to cover today is what Learning Ally sees as how we want to work with schools and states. A good portion of it is that there is our approach isn't more than just providing the accessible materials. We're more than just a repository that folks can take materials out of. We see our role as being focused more so on those downstream outcomes that we want to see with our students. We're looking to be able to be more than just a library, but a partner with the schools that we work with to be able to help your students who have print disabilities, be they blindness, visual impairments, specific learning disability, dyslexia, what it may be, to help them achieve the academic goals that they're striving for, that your teachers are striving for, and your schools in general. So to that point, Learning Ally conceives of ourselves as a leading educational technology firm. We're a nonprofit and have been for, this is our 70th year in operation, originally starting as Recording for the Blind. And now in the interim, some folks may have known us as Recording for the Blind and Dyslexic, and for the last several years as Learning Ally. Okay. One moment. Okay. Got to figure out which button to press. One of the things that we focus on closely is what are the problems that your teachers are trying to solve that your students are facing, given that they're not able to read on grade level or unable to access text at all. Now, this can run from the most basic, which is they can't read the material on grade level with their peers, but that leads to them not being able to achieve the academic standards that they're striving for because they can't get to the content. In addition, we see that students who can't perform on par with their peers because of a disability such as dyslexia or other ones that prevent them from accessing the text become withdrawn from class. They don't participate in any class discussion. And it can also lead to behavioral issues. Students may begin to act out. The analogy I make, or rather the story I take, is that when little boys are bored, they want to entertain themselves. And if they're going to entertain themselves, they're going to entertain everybody else around them at the same time. And those sorts of disruptions can happen in the classroom when students aren't better engaged with the material that's being presented. Audiobooks in general, and in particular how Learning Ally tries to approach the problem, helps teachers resolve that problem and get students reading on their grade level. This is a quick illustration to understand the concept that we're focusing on. Typical student reading on grade level is represented by that straight upward slanting line coming in on 6th grade, a little below where they may be, but with a steady growth over the course of the year with proper instruction. Unfortunately, the students that we're focusing on are represented by the lower curved line starting with the blue dot. They're reading 1, 2, 3 grade levels below where they are in terms of their age, and that because they can't access the material, they can't get to the background information, they don't develop the vocabulary the same way, that enormous learning gap is what's created. And as I started off with, that's where Learning Ally's focuses in helping teachers and schools close and mitigate that problem. Our goal is to be a partner with the schools to be able to help get those students who are struggling to get on grade level closer to where they need to be. So some of the benefits that we know human-read audiobooks in particular bring is helping students get and maintain focus. It helps them with the process of visualizing the material that they're reading and getting a deeper understanding from it. And as a consequence, they develop greater retention. So right off the bat, providing the audio material, particularly in a case where we have synchronized text with the audio, which is our voice text books, which is increasingly what we're producing these days. We still do have several of our classic set, which were recorded with just the audio, allows the students to overcome the need to laboriously decode every word and be able to focus in on what they're actually learning. And the next step with that is the idea of visualization, that the students have the opportunity now to use that mental capacity that they have, that brain bandwidth, instead of just spending it all on the decoding, to be able to start to integrate and visualize what the story is in front of them, make connections back and forth between what they know, what's written, and hopefully be able to start making some projections about what's to come in what they're reading. All of this works to help reinforce the retention, because rather than it just being a series of words, one after the other in a stream without context, because we've been able to lift the burden of the decoding, we're able to foster that retention and be able to give that body of knowledge an opportunity to start to develop in the child's brain and be able to become that background knowledge that is so critical to their future success. Our audiobook library that we make available to folks, we have both the books that your kids want to read and the books that your kids have to read. The bulk of our library is textbooks. Almost 2/3 of it is that. But also we have about 35%, which are popular novels. And that runs anything from the classics on through to the current stuff the kids like to read. Now, while my children, normally point out that my references in this area are always sort of out of date. It's the Harry Potters, it's the Hunger Games, it's the Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It's those types of novels that the kids want to read on their own, that their friends are reading as well, and that without this type of accommodation, they're locked out of. And this is part of our strategy, the way we look at it, to make certain that kids don't just look at this as being how they do their homework, but as a way for them to expand their interests and be able to engage more broadly in the social aspects of their peers in school. Yes, they now have an audiobook that helps them to do their homework in whatever subject that may be, but they're also able to read the novels that their friends are reading on the weekends as well and engage in that as with their peers. As a consequence, what we see in the benefits from the audiobooks is that we're able to get students excited about reading. We take it away from being this laborious task and turn it into something that for many of them, they can actually get very engaged with. One of my colleagues, Jen Doherty, who works up in Massachusetts, loves to tell a story of a parent who had reached out to her saying that once a kid had the audiobook on their iPad, she had to go in at 10 o'clock at night and take the iPad away and say, it's bedtime. It's, readings for tomorrow at this point. You need to get some sleep. And this is from a child who previously would have avoided reading under all circumstances. That's a sort of turnaround. It's an exemplary example that we have, but that's sort of turnaround that we hope to engage. Furthermore, now that the kids start developing that background knowledge by using the audiobooks, you get motivation and heightened engagement with what the material is. So as we look holistically on how Learning Ally works to support students in schools, at the core is our human-read audiobooks. But around that is this set of support services that we provide. In particular, when we talk about supporting your schools, we have our own team of education engagement managers who work with schools to make certain that they have the requisite training to be able to launch a program effectively. We also provide reporting back to you, back to the schools, about how the kids are interacting with the materials. And this is one thing which is something that we thought was very important, and we've since seen it be great value with the schools that we do work with, and the teachers we work with. Midnight of every night, we update our systems, and based on the playback devices that we use, the playback software, we're able to give to a teacher the following day a report that they can look up through what's called Teacher Ally, our online learning management portal, exactly how the students are interacting with the books. What books are they reading? How long did they spend on task? How many pages did they complete in their homework? This sort of real-time data gives teachers the ability to look at what's happening with the students' education, how they're interacting with the material, and make adjustments in their teaching strategy accordingly. So again, this helps support the teachers. We also provide them with training and supports to how to better implement an audiobook program in their class. And we have supports for students, and we'll get into that in a little bit more, ways to engage students and get them to become more independent readers. And then with parents, we also help support them through resources that we make available through our website, through Facebook pages for parents that we also help foster and curate so that they have a sense of community and connection. So when a school engages with us and brings Learning Ally in, what do they get? Right off the bat, it's unlimited access to our collection of 80,000 textbooks and novels across the entire year. Our collection is 80,000, as mentioned, it's probably about 83,000 right now. It's a curated collection. So when I first started with Learning Ally more than 10 years ago, we had an enormous number of books that we asserted were in our collection. But the reality was that we were carrying things like the 1980 edition of the Hoeflin Mifflin textbook, something that nobody was using anymore. So rather than just making our collection become this storehouse of past novels and past books, we keep it curated. We make sure that it's the material that's being currently used in schools and classrooms across the country, and that you can get to it easily. The other piece that we have is unlimited access through the various playback software options we have. Now, it's all under our program called Link, and you can see the icon in the upper corner there. It looks like a backwards parentheses, which is available on iOS devices. It's available for PCs and Macintosh computers, Chromebooks, and Androids. And it works across all those devices. So if a student is using let's say, a Chromebook in school but has a smartphone at home for reading, they will have those accounts synced across those devices so they can use the different devices and be able to keep track of where they are going through it. With regard to the training for teachers, we'll go a little bit more depth than that. We have on our website available for teachers right now a set of pre-recorded, ready-to-go self-serve training resources, tools to help them understand how to use Teacher Ally, which is, you can see there on the iPad, a screen capture of it there, which is a tool to allow a teacher to be able to add students into an account, assign books to those students, and then monitor how those students are doing going forward, but also strategies and other tools to help them shape their teaching practice to be able to effectively integrate the audiobook. One thing that we know from reports that come out from the U.S. Department of Education is that using educational technology in the classroom, getting it effectively deployed, has been a barrier for years and continues to be so. The Department of Education has spent millions of dollars on stepping up grants over the years, looking for strategies and trying to develop ways to get these technologies used as effectively as possible. Learning Ally has built this toolkit to be able to help teachers do that. It's not just books thrown over the transom saying, here's some audiobooks, have at it. We're actually giving both real-time classroom tips on how they can implement it in their classroom the next day after the training, and also to support it going forward. And as I talked about a little bit when we had the bigger holistic graph up, is how we engage with the students. And here's two examples that we've got here that we point out. One's called the Great Reading Games, and the other one's the Summer Reading Together program. Great Reading Games is a 6-week-long contest nationally that we run with schools who enroll with us. And the idea is that struggling readers tend so often to be unable to participate in Read Across America contests or other sorts of readathons because of how they interact with regular text. So we've given them their own contest where we give them 6 weeks for classrooms and for students to be able to work together and read as many pages, as many books as they can over the 6 weeks. And the schools that do the best, that perform the highest, well, you can see the photo there of certificates that all the kids got because they were the best in their state, best in their class of size of the school that they're in, and in, of course, the best in the nation. We also have, as we mentioned, the Summer Reading Together program. We're all aware of the summer learning slide. Kids check out and don't get any sort of reinforcement over the summer by and large, and you see it in their scores. So we try to, and that's why our services go year round, to be able to continue to give kids access to reading, keep them engaged through this sort of contest over the summer, to keep reading books, to keep learning and stay engaged throughout the year, not just while they're in school. The most recent addition to this is what we call 33andMe. We're still piloting this. It's not fully rolled out across the entire nation, but we expect to as we refine it from the learnings that we're getting from the schools we're working with. It's aimed at kids who are probably a little bit older than the ones for the Great Reading Games, sort of later middle school grades, but also as well, as you can see there from the picture, for younger kids as well. It's a broader swath. And the idea is to, again, give the kids some gamification incentives. 33 days, reading each day, read 33 books, or to read for 33 minutes on a weekend. Each of these are key goals that we've seen. If we can get students to those points, their own reading trends tend to keep going up. It's that getting them over the hump from their own self-perception that they're not a reader to seeing themselves as a reader now and engaging with books and text going forward using the audio system. So 33andMe, again, we're piloting it right now, but we're expecting it to be able to roll out full scale in the near future, potentially in the fall, but let's put a big asterisk on that. And we see it as a great tool to be able to help the teachers get the program launched in their classroom, get kids engaged, and be able to get them reading. And one of the last pieces that we have that helps support kids is that we have the 1 in 5 initiative, which is a focus at students with dyslexia to be able to help them see across the country that they're not alone. In many cases, kids with dyslexia will start developing a low self-esteem. They think of themselves as dumb. They think of themselves as inadequate. And this program helps them connect online with other students who are like them and reinforce that they're not alone, they're not dumb. Yes, they're unique, but that's fine. And that could actually be great. It helps them bolster their self-esteem and gives them tips on how to become a better reader through that system. And we also have our awards program, which has been philanthropically supported for decades now. The National Achievement Awards have once a year awards for high school seniors who have learning disabilities and college seniors who have blindness or visual impairment. And it's something that of a way to really recognize students who have done remarkable things in spite of the fact that they have to work harder to overcome the disabilities that they have. So the big question, how does a school, a local education agency, or an SEA access Learning Ally? We do not receive direct federal funding, unlike some other producers. We do have a contractual relationship with our schools that we work with. There is a cost share that they put forward. We are a nonprofit. We're largely supported by philanthropic dollars and volunteers who read the books for us. But there is a cost associated with getting Learning Ally in your school. You can do it for schools primarily two ways. There's a school site license, which is based on the population enrolled in your school, and it gives you that full, unfettered, unlimited access. As many students as you certify as being qualified for the service, you can enroll, and you have unlimited access to the books. That's our preferred way of working with the school because it gives you full flexibility. If a kid is identified mid-year as needing the accommodation, you have the ability to put that student on that day, that moment, add their books to their bookshelf, download it onto their device, and get them reading that afternoon. The second way is a student seat license. While the student gets full access to the collection and full access to unlimited numbers of books as they need, either self-selected or assigned by their teacher, the significant difference is it's a limited number of seats that the school then brings on board. And that makes it different from a situation where you have immediate unlimited access. If they want to add students, they have to go back through whatever their procurement process is to add seats on. We do it particularly for schools which are looking at very small population, BVI populations within a department, within a school, for example, is one area. But there are some statewide agreements that we have where the state funds on a per seat basis. And the third way is what's a household membership. And that's typically done by individuals who the parents are doing it for the kids because for whatever reason they can't get it through their school. And it's one membership for all the members of the household. From our experience, you tend to have multiple individuals who can qualify, who are related because of the genetic connection. So as my little clip art there shows, you've got a pair of siblings remarkably quiet and sitting and listening to their book. Eligibility. We don't draw our books from NIMAC. We get our books directly from publishers, we buy copies of the book, and we operate under the Chafee Amendment. We have 4 classifications that we track for why a student is getting access. Reading accommodation, specific learning disability, physical disability, or blindness and visual impairment. Most of these should be common to all of you. Reading accommodation is probably the one which seems the most outside of what might be your normal experience. From our perspective, the professionals at the school who are evaluating the students, who see their work and who have done an examination of where that student is, can make a determination that a student may not need special education designation, doesn't need an IEP, but does need accommodations to be able to succeed in school. This could be a 504 in a formalized sense, or in some cases, it doesn't necessarily have to be a 504. Again, from our perspective, we work with the non-public schools as well. We work with colleges and universities. We work with lifetime learners. So we are not bound in to say we can only serve you if you have an IEP. If you have an individual who is a competent authority, you can visit our website to see more information about the variety of individuals and professionals who count as competent authorities. certifying that the individual has a need for this service and that the various exclusionary categories are not in effect, we're able to give you access to the materials and be able to get that child up and reading immediately. Where does this all get us to in terms of Learning Ally? Well, this year, we're serving 14,800 plus schools across the US. Each one of those fuzzy little orange dots represents one of the schools that we're working with. Over 480,000 students nationwide are using our services. And between the ones picked by the students and assigned by teachers, 1.61 million books are out there right now. And as of last night at midnight, because I checked the numbers this morning, they've read 46.4 million pages so far this year, and they're on track to do quite a bit more before the end of the school year. I know I've thrown a whole lot at you. I hope you have found it useful. And now, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to try and answer them. And if I can't answer, I'll try and deflect gracefully.
Hi, Ed. It's
Hey,
Cynthia. I didn't see any questions come into the chat, but I have a couple of questions. One is for the attendees and one is for you. So my question for the attendees is, do you have students in your state who are using Learning Ally? And that may be that you just know that there are students using Learning Ally, or perhaps you know that there are schools with memberships or districts who have memberships supporting students with Learning Ally. And Ed, you may know as well which states.
All 50 states. We have schools that are enrolled with us in all 50 states, varying degrees. If we go, let me see if I can go back here. You can see that obviously we're probably much more densely along the East Coast and West Coast, down in Florida, where we have a significant state-funded program. Texas, there's a significant state-funded program. Illinois, New Jersey, Massachusetts, North Carolina, Virginia, and Indiana. So you see we have concentrations there, but all 50 states, we are present.
Great. I'd want to make sure everybody was listening. Look at all of this that came into the chat. So we've got Ohio, district by district basis. Maine, we have yes, so we know that there's some usage there. We can also see it in your map. Some of the most northern places in Maine are using Learning Ally. And Jane asked a question. How can a NIMAC coordinator tell if our state is using Learning Ally? Of course, there's this map, so it looks like for sure.
It's our lovely dot map.
But where could there be more direct information, perhaps, of what districts are using it?
Shoot me an email, and I will look into our data systems and find out what schools are there. And we're more than happy to share with you how many students are using, etc.
Okay, great. So that's ebray@learningally.org. Great. And of course, I know that I've seen you in Texas presenting your Learning Ally services to that state. Do you want to talk a little bit about how your relationship with Texas works?
Cynthia, could I just interpose before we get on to that? Nicole had a question. It says, this has been super helpful. Can you talk a little about the different formats that Learning Ally offers? Do the formats include text as well as human-narrated audio? And then she goes on to say, in other words, does the reader sync the text and audio when the student is using the material?
We do there's two versions of our books that exist. There's what we refer to as our classic audio, and that is solely human narration. In the last several years, what we've been doing is all the books we produce have been synced with the full text, full human narration with highlighted synchronization, so that as the student reads along, the text which is being read by the narrator is the default is yellow, but there are options within the system to change colors and what have you to something that the reader prefers. So we do have both, and our more recent books are almost exclusively in that voice text as we go forward.
Great. Nicole, does that answer your question? And while we're waiting for the follow-up from Nicole, Ed, do you want to speak a little bit to how Learning Ally's relationship works in Texas?
Texas is one of our largest states. We've been receiving from them statewide funding for statewide access. Now in Texas, it's relatively stripped down because it's such a mature program that we don't do much support services there. But any public school in the state of Texas, including their charter school systems, can enroll and start putting their students on any day during the week. Now, right now, I think we've got somewhere around, I want to say 6,000 schools in Texas who are enrolled, over 100,000 students, and tens of millions of pages that they read each year. Similarly, Florida has a program. Theirs, though, is for a large but set number of sites, 1,700 schools across the state. Illinois does something similar. Theirs is 750. So there, again, we actively make certain that we're working with the schools so that they are engaged, that their kids are getting signed up, that they're getting the books that they need, and that they're reading. But in each of those cases, the State Department of Education, the TEA in Texas, ISB in Illinois, and the BSIS Bureau down in Florida provide funding. In each case, it actually happens to be through a budget line item that exists that directs the Department of Education to use those funds to be able to support these schools. Some of them are state revenue, and in Texas in particular, it's actually a carve out of federal IDEA Part B funds. I assume everyone on the call knows that you can use about 10% of your IDEA funds for statewide activities, and Learning Ally and accessible materials is absolutely within the sweet spot for that.
Okay, great. John Brandt from Maine, yes, if there's a way to know how many students per district, and I assume that would be an email to you to get that information?
Shoot me an email, and John, I'll be able to hook you up with quite a bit of data.
And Victoria in Florida is saying that Florida has an additional state-funded discretionary grant with Learning Ally for the provision of accessible audiobooks for qualifying students.
That was a wave to Victoria, by the way.
Yeah. And then I just wanted to follow up, you know, I think the way that you were describing the eligibility for Learning Ally is really important. And I think that as we're going through this series of how states can, and NIMAC State Coordinators, AEM State Contacts can coordinate the provision of accessible materials to students in their states, how important it is for them to communicate to educators in the state that eligibility really isn't on the student. So it needs to be a decision-making process that if a student needs accessible educational materials to learn, then they as a student qualify to receive them. What the next step needs to be is going through the process of determining from where, what are the sources from which materials can be pulled in alternative formats. And then those sources are what have the eligibility criteria, and that it's really source by source, which you outlined in your presentation.
Exactly. If you're pulling from the NIMAC that has a separate set of much more restrictive rules, as everyone understands, since we're not drawing from that, we're able to use a broader eligibility criteria, one that, you know, we've had these conversations with the publishers, with the folks from the National Library Service for the blind and physically disabled. Ours pretty much parallels what Bookshare sort of modeled theirs on ours, and we go back and forth. But we do try and make it so that it is as expansive as allowed under the law that exists, and that any student who needs our service can get it. To your point about the student need, sometimes, you know, not all of our state programs, by way of example, are we able to offer the same available eligibility. States have, based on how they're funding or what their particular policies are, can and do sometimes put restrictions on what is available. Virginia, by way of example, requires that the student have an IEP to be able to access Learning Ally through their AEM Center. Previously, Florida had a more restrictive rule, but a few years ago, they revised it and it has become much more accessible in that sense. So there is that blend between what are your policies, where are you sourcing the materials from. From our perspective as an organization who's trying to work with you, we keep a very broad, open eligibility criteria, and it's largely based on what your professionals who are working with the students determine is what's right for them. If they're coming saying, yeah, Learning Ally is the right tool, and we work with you to make sure they get the books they need.
And Ed, through that eligibility procedure with Learning Ally, does Learning Ally collect the signatures of the competent authorities that are certifying that the student is eligible for materials from your collection?
Through the Teacher Ally learning management portal that I mentioned, you certify, the professionals at the school level certify that they have done their due diligence and that the student qualifies. They then let us know under which of the 4 categories, which helps us track how that is being used. But the paperwork is collected and maintained at your school system. So you don't have to make up extra copies. You don't have to send them to us. That said, for those schools that are using Teacher Ally, for those individual accounts, we do end up getting the paperwork in those cases and review to make certain that the individual who is doing the certification falls under what's considered a competent authority, that we have a proper amount of understanding of who this person is. Typically, we try and collect what's their title, what's their certifications. Most everybody, even from classroom teacher on up to various special ed counselors, have some level of state licensure. So we try and collect what's their license number and what entity has licensed them, be it the Department of Ed, Department of Human Services, whatever it may be in the specific case.
Thank you. That was very clear. All right, so I will go ahead and if you stop sharing, Ed, I will pick up where you left off and share some final information. We're still welcoming questions and comments while we go through the final information of the webinar. So please feel free to continue to contribute to the conversation. We'll continue our series next month with the American Printing House, who will be joining us. They're great friends of ours. Nicole Gaines is with us today from the NIMAC, and the NIMAC is at the American Printing House for the blind. We will have 2 representatives from American Printing House whom we haven't heard from join us on May 9th to explain their accessible media producer services. That's on May 9th from 1 to 2 in the afternoon Eastern. And that announcement went out shortly before this webinar began. So please check your inboxes for that announcement and put it on your calendars. Our survey, of course, is open. Please be sure to include in the evaluation, not just your ratings, but the comments really help us understand what else our AEM State Contacts and NIMAC coordinators need in the field. And we're hoping that perhaps as a result of this webinar series, there are some questions that you're getting that maybe you didn't know that you had before. So it will certainly be helpful to us to know more about what's on your mind and what the AEM Center and the NIMAC can be doing to support you. And Leslie will also put the link to the survey in the chat. Of course, you can always connect with us in multiple ways. Ed generously shared his email address with you, as well as other contact information during the presentation. You can always contact us and we can put you in touch with the people who can answer your questions if it's a specific source for accessible materials. You can email us at aim@cas.org. You can give us a call. Following us on Twitter will also always give you additional resources and new strategies and help you reach out to some ideas that perhaps you haven't thought about to implement in your state. You can also, of course, like us on Facebook, because we also communicate with the field through that social media. Yeah, so that is it. That's our final slide. Let's see what else we have for comments and questions. And before I conclude with the contact information. Speaking of contact, I just wanted to thank my AEM Center colleagues who joined us today. Leslie O'Callahan, who's our operations coordinator. I know Luis Perez was with us today, and Nicole Gaines of the NIMAC, as well as our captioner, Beth. Thank you so much for providing your service today. John Brandt asks, if schools have specific questions about Learning Ally, is Ed the man to contact? And I think the answer is Ed.
No.
I don't think you're going to deflect that question.
Yes, we have a full staff of folks who have various regional responsibilities to work with schools, answering specific school questions. At the bottom of, let's see, I was going to say, let me reshare my learningally.org/educator. If you go to that, you can, they can fill out a quick contact form there, and it'll get to the right person who will get back to them quickly to answer their questions.
Okay, great. And I am, okay, good. Leslie got that in there. For some reason, I was trying to enter that into the chat and I got a space between Learning and Ally. I had some autocorrect going on. So thank you, Leslie, for putting that in the chat. Any other questions for Ed while you have him here live with the AEM Center?
You want to talk about the Marrakesh Treaty and the changes to Chafee that are coming up because of the bill dropped in the Senate? Let's go for it.
You know, Ed, we do have a little bit of time, and I bet that there will be some people who may appreciate your thoughts, the information that you have about that.
Since we have the time, and I'll be more than happy to fill it, as most of us should know, I assume most of us have heard about the Marrakesh Treaty, which is the latest round of the WIPO, World International Intellectual Property Organization Treaty, which would allow for cross-national border sharing of accessible materials. So the United States, with collections such as Learning Allies, the Hathi Trust, Bookshare's collection, and other ones that exist, there's a great deal of demand to get these books shared out into other countries. Bookshare has done some work to be able to negotiate what they need to in terms of the copyright of how these books are in other places. The Marrakesh Treaty will help resolve all that and make it so that those providers here in the US can share their books with people in other countries who are part of the treaty, and vice versa. Well, to do this, we needed to make some changes to the existing copyright law that is out there. A bill was just introduced in the last few weeks in the Senate, supported bipartisanly with Senator Grassley, Senator Feinstein, who are both the chair and ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, as well as other luminaries, including New Jersey's senator, who's the ranking member on the Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Bob Menendez. And it would make a few technical changes to the copyright law to bring US law into conformity with this national model that's out there. My expectation is that, just given what's happening in DC these days and the fact that it's an election year, we probably won't see this bill become law between now and January, but this will be the beginning of this process. There'll be some hearings, there'll probably even be a markup, which is when the committee looks at the bill and makes tweaks to it. But ultimately what this is going to mean for us is that your students today will be able to access books which are currently in collections in Canada or Great Britain in accessible format without having them be reconverted here in the States. And will make a tremendous impact for people who are in other nations who want access to our collections. So it will truly be a revolutionary change in how we do accessible media across the world.
So Ed, how will Learning Ally look differently should this pass?
Well, that's something that actually the people around here have started to spend some time to noodle on. Under this law, it would allow us to either work with another authorized entity. So Learning Ally would be one, and we could work with, say, the National Library in Great Britain or the Canadian Library for the Blind or some other agency like that, and just say, like interlibrary loan, here's our file, or could we borrow yours? It would also allows us to do individual membership. So we could conceivably under this start offering Learning Ally to public schools in Great Britain and Canada the same way we do here in the US. At this point, we haven't The treaty hasn't been ratified yet by the Senate, and this bill hasn't been passed. So we're still in the early stages of figuring out what we would want to do, how we would want to do it, because what we don't want to end up doing is leaving, start chasing that and not be able to continue to support the folks here who are currently the ones who are receiving our services, particularly our historic population of individuals who are blind or visually impaired, or our current 14,000 plus schools who use us today. But it's something that we're beginning to look at to say, well, what does this mean for us? How would we change?
And I'm sure this will require some coordination globally with other organizations that are doing your work in their respective places, that there would need to be some cross-sharing and some understanding of how this will, what kind of system would be in place to make this efficient and fair.
Exactly. And the treaty doesn't create a supranational organization to do that. So it's going to be a lot of bilateral negotiation between our library and somebody else's as we go through. I suspect that the Library of Congress, National Library Service will take a quarterback position on a lot of this, but that's yet to be determined definitively.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Ed on the Marrakesh? All right, I think this, what I love about this field is that you just never know what's going to be next. There's always, Luis Perez and I were working this morning, and what we have coming up and what we're working on. And I said, you know what, the best thing about this job is that it's never done. There's always a new opportunity and a new challenge, and we always rise to the occasion in this field. So thank you for your work, Ed.
No, my pleasure. Thank you again for having me. I hope that the information I shared out today was useful to everyone. Please do take advantage. Shoot me an email. Let me know. I'd be more than happy to share some information with you. And again, if you know of individual schools that are looking for information and want to talk about how or whether Learning Ally is the right service to bring in and collaborate with them, learningally.org/educator. They can put in a request there of their contact information, and one of our team will get back in touch with them quickly.
Okay, great. Leslie, one more time, if you would just drop the link to the survey in the chat. We will give everybody a little bit more time to grab that link. And I want to thank Ed Bray one more time for joining us today in our series for AEM State Contacts and NIMAC Coordinators. And we hope everybody will come back on May 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern, when we are introduced to the services of American Printing House and how they can support your work in your state.
One last plug, if anyone happens to be headed to Bethesda next week for the National Association of State Agencies for the Blind, try and find me out there. I'll be there 2 nights. So if you want to meet face to face, I kind of stand out in the crowd. I'm a big guy. So please search me out.
Great, will do. Thanks a lot, Ed.
Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.